Hello, everyone, and welcome to our ISPCAN webinar. My name's Jane Estes, and I'm the ISPCAN Knowledge and Content Development Manager and your moderator for today's session. Also engaging you in the chat box is Holly Malcolm, our ISPCAN Membership and Marketing Manager. ISPCAN International webinars are always free of charge and cover diverse topics which are presented by subject matter experts from around the globe. These 90-minute webinars are designed to help our members and partners gain access to knowledge and expertise to inform care, improve practice, and drive policy change. All this is critical to help improve the outcomes for children globally. And now I'm thrilled to introduce Pragathi Tamala, the CEO of ISPCAN, who has some exciting news to share about two events.
Welcome, everyone. Great to be with you today. At ISPCAN, we're always trying to push the boundaries of learning, trying to create new opportunities for learning to bring data to action. And I'm really excited today to talk to you about a couple of new things that we have in the works. The first is called the Huddle. This is an opportunity for us to take a different case every year, to think about how we could have done things differently from every perspective: medical, social work, legal, public health, coming together to think about what we could have done, what we should have done, and how we can change it moving forward so we don't keep repeating the same mistakes. This interactive learning is a really special opportunity for members, and due to some amazing sponsorship we've gotten, it's very affordable, and we'd love for you to learn more about this. Applications are now open for this, and we hope that we can get a lot of members from different sectors to join and ultimately help us to create some international best practice around how we manage cases of child sexual abuse, which is going to be our focus for year one. So to learn more about it, go to our website, but I hope that you take a minute to learn about this. And every year we'll take a different type of case so that, again, we don't keep repeating the same mistakes, and we can do a deep dive into how we should be managing these cases, and ultimately also doing more on prevention and policy development to help prevent these types of child abuse. The second thing I want to talk about today is that November is an incredibly special month for ISPCAN. It's our time where we want to really raise awareness around the world about how important child protection is, and to reach outside of our typical sectors to really advance what you are doing. So we're encouraging each of you to share a resource, a tool, information, even a fact, whatever you think that would help us to help people to understand that every single one of us is a mandatory reporter. Every single one of us can be doing something to help protect children and safeguard children wherever they are. So please post something and tag us with hashtag ISPCAN, hashtag Rise Up to End Child Abuse, and share in your community, because every single one of us is a leader in what we do. And now I just want to talk about this webinar for a minute. And in this month of November, we've curated a few special webinars that we think are really going to focus on prevention and help provide tools and resources to people for practical prevention opportunities. This first one is also coming together around a new working group that ISPCAN is planning to launch on safeguarding. During our 2025 Congress in Vilnius, we want to launch this new working group on safeguarding because it's important for us to now bring together all of these important minds from every perspective to develop some international guidance and best practice on safeguarding so we can do more to prevent any kind of harm or abuse to children wherever they are outside the home. So I'm excited to talk about this new working group, and you'll hear more about this new opportunity in this webinar that we're about to launch today. So thank you all for joining us, and I hope that you continue to engage with ISPCAN wherever you are so that we can do more together. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you so much, Pragathi. And in part of our desire to provide you with the latest prevention tools and tools and resources that can help you in your practice, please know that our ISPCAN Knowledge Hub is always available to you with open access, centralized library-based tools. These are webinars, journal clubs, master classes, data-driven global reports, and our partner downloadable and shared resources. So if you have an open access resource that you would like shared in the ISPCAN Knowledge Hub to further disseminate the great work that you're doing, please email it to me at partnerships@ispacan.org. And we are so thrilled that you're here with us today. So I want to share some tips for making the most of today's session. Just please engage with us. This session is meant to be an active, interactive learning platform. Please participate by sharing your comments in the chat and your questions in the Q&A box throughout the webinar. We would like to have the questions ready to begin at the conclusion of the presentation. So if you could type them throughout the session, that would be very beneficial. Also, to enhance your experience, you can enable closed captioning by hitting captions on your Zoom control bar. And now please take a moment, introduce yourself to other attendees, our ISPCAN team, and our featured presenters in the chat box. Let us know where you're joining from and your organization and your discipline. And as always, for joining us today, a recording of this session, the panel discussion, any presentation slides, and link to feature resources will be sent to you directly after the webinar. Today's topic, safeguarding fundamentals, protecting children from abuse in sports. Child safeguarding is about keeping all children safe from harm, abuse, violence, exploitation, and neglect by having effective measures in place to ensure that children are protected. Understanding child abuse in youth sports requires an understanding of the dynamics of the sports environment and the power structures that exist within it. Children are often vulnerable to abuse by coaches, trainers, and other authority figures who have a significant power and influence over them. Prevalence analysis suggests that the problem is pervasive and it affects a wide range of sports. Therefore, it's critical to examine the root causes of child abuse in sports programs and to develop strategies to prevent it. Our key learning objectives for today's session are to understand what the current research shows about abuse in sports prevalence and its lasting impacts, and to hear firsthand Paul Stewart's incredible story and the lessons learned from his journey. Paul will help us understand the silence and why victims fear speaking out, and to identify the signs and symptoms of abuse in athletics. And finally, and most importantly, to learn how to build a safeguarding network. And now to meet our presenters. Paul Stewart. Paul is a former Premiership footballer who played for Man City, Spurs, and Liverpool. He was also capped 3 times for England. In 2016, Paul waved his anonymity and spoke about the physical and sexual abuse he endured at the hands of a youth coach as a 10-year-old growing up in Manchester. Paul has joined EFL's Life Skills team to raise awareness about the importance of safeguarding. He's worked with the FA and SFA and Premiership clubs, delivering workshops to academy coaches, parents, and players. And his delivery, while hard-hitting, also gives insight into safeguarding from a survivor's perspective. Paul was awarded a doctorate from Salford University and the Contribution to League Football Award in 2024, which is the highest award given to an individual for his contribution to safeguarding. And Rocco Brigante, CEO of Spiccio Magico and ISPCAN Board of Directors member. Rocco has a PhD in education, a degree in philosophy, a postgraduate degree related to minors in psychopedagogical counseling elements. He has a master's degree in European project and development. He is a public bodies policy expert and an expert in child safeguarding policies for nonprofit organizations in the field of sports. Rocco is a consultant for child abuse and neglect data collection for the national level and the National Authority for Child Rights Guarantee. And he also consults on safeguarding in sport for the Italian government sport department. Rocco is also a valued member of the ISPCAN Board of Directors. Rocco was not able to attend in person today, so we pre-recorded his session, and I'll be playing that for you shortly. But Paul, I would love for you to take a moment now and explain to us how this partnership with Rocco began.
Thank you, Jane. Good morning, everyone, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thanks to IPSCAN for inviting me on today. Well, I met Rocco over a year ago. I delivered a session in Edinburgh, Scotland for IPSCAN. After my session, Rocco came up to me, chatted about the session, and it seemed from the onset that we both had the same vision. Since then, I've travelled around Europe to Uppsala with Rocco. We were recently in Latvia, and as I said, I think we both share the same vision. So together, we are organising some initiatives to hopefully roll out in Italy, because Rocco works with the government over there. He also works with top Serie A clubs. So in the near future, we're hopefully going to be able to roll out some very important initiatives, starting in Bergamo in Italy, and then beyond. So it's been a pleasure knowing Rocco now for a year, and his vision and insight is invaluable.
Thank you so much, Paul. And now I'm going to play Rocco's session.
Hello everyone, ciao a tutte e a tutti. This is my Italian greet to start this IPSCAN webinar. It's with particular pleasure that I begin this presentation of my contribution to this webinar about safeguarding. And in my opinion, this is one of the area of proximity, closeness, containment and growth where our girls and boys, young athletes often engage daily. This field and this scenario precisely define one of the most significant, beautiful and important, relevant experience in a growth journey of a child. That is why we are here to protect this space and this experience, to safeguard them, and fundamentally to define prevention systems that ensure our application of safeguarding is effective, practical, functional, and capable of securing this extraordinary and wonderful experience that sport is meant to be. To do this, I thought I would start by sharing with you the Italian experience, specifically the experience of the Italian government, the presidency of the Council of Ministers through its Department for Sport. I had the honor of leading a national working group for 2 years that focused on developing a policy framework in the field of sport. This was the first specific in-depth experience in Italy, a national effort aimed at building knowledge, culture, and a capacity building through a collection of good practices that originated from the grassroots level. This approach values the historical contribution of several associations that have worked on this topic, on this thematic over the years. The work was exciting, highly participatory, and particularly rich, not only on a professional level. This is a coalition of organizations that have chosen to use sport as a vehicle, as a driver for promoting well-being and, of course, safeguarding. Additionally, within this extraordinary team, we have national federation from various sports. You can see the list of all the organizations involved, of course, in Italian. We involve the Football Federation, and we also collaborate with Save the Children, Terre des Hommes, UNICEF, and several organizations that have addressed issues like abuse, maltreatment, and violence against women, for example, problems that unfortunately continue to afflict our countries repeatedly. As you can see from the slide, we aim to establish specific and strategic objective. We try to implement prevention and protection systems that will minimize the risk of neglect, create healthy and safe environments, and ensure the right of minors, the right of girls and boys to have a sporting experience free from any concern. From this perspective, we obviously aim to develop national guidelines, of course. In what way and with what strategy? We sought to elaborate a shared framework that would allow local authorities to adopt and implement national regulations through the establishment of minimum standard. This standard also include training modules, of course. We work on creating tools and a web portal to facilitate initial contact through awareness, through knowledge, through an awareness raising action and a preliminary understanding of the topic. As you can say, promoting a culture of child protection in sport has been the main key, but at the same time create communication campaign, because the way we try to have a narrative path about child abuse in sport could be absolutely strategic, as I said. It's important to know that sports organizations are often not equipped to handle such issues. We often deal with volunteers, with individuals with good intention who are able of doing extraordinary things, but lack of competence, of course, necessary qualification, experience, expertise in the areas of child abuse and neglect. Therefore, they need to be equipped to address these challenges. The idea is to empower sport organizations as well as their staff, athletes, and families. This creates a cascading effect. The primary goal is to promote a culture of child protection in sports, as well as to find keys and strategies to raise awareness and ensure that this topic is discussed. This was exemplified in the impactful speech by Paul Stewart. I've tried to summarize as simple as possible what our journey has been. The initial phase involved an opening for a call for proposal to create a technical committee, the establishment of the national working groups, planning, defining thematic areas, and conducting preliminary research to identify best practices at national level. We also set up separate working groups to identify critical aspects. This led to establish technical committee defining priority areas and the initial draft of the framework that we later informed the policy design we created. Throughout this process, we remain focused on critical aspect, adopting a risk assessment approach, the idea of minimizing risks, to passing through early identification of critical and vulnerable areas where compensatory and protective measures need to be implemented. We placed significant emphasis on collecting best practices from both national and international level and national and international literature, culminating in this initial draft. We then saw a full evaluation process, which proved to be particularly complex and challenging, but also exciting, as it allowed us to adopt diverse perspectives and representative point of view from all various realities present in this working group. Subsequently, we succeeded in establishing connection at the government level to turn this initiative into a legislative proposal, a law proposal. Over the past 2 years, Italy has adopted a regulation that guides sport organization toward the mandatory implementation of a child protection policy, with minimum standard that we have incorporated into this framework, which we will review in the upcoming slides, of course. We focus on survey regarding collection of official documents on training, recruitment, and essential local context. It's crucial to remain close to sport realities, not just in a national context, in a national perspective. We also maintain working groups, particularly focused on general policy, training requirement, and strategic communication. Ultimately, we concluded with a key concept: prevention and education at first, working on knowledge and awareness, as I said, and training, because empowering and improving specific competence could be a very strong protective factor for everyone. The territoriality, staying on the context, a tailor-made approach to be next to have a local approach, to have a community-based approach. Functionality, of course, we need to be practical, and a communication path, because promoting a culture of child safeguarding is not so easy in this context. Try either to involve children, of course, attempting to create other pillars about the participation of young athletes into this path. Of course, we are still in a phase of evolution at national level. Unfortunately, this National Technical Committee is no longer operational, but it has started a significant movement at a national level, promoting a series of local initiatives and best practices, which was the overarching goal of our work. To this day, we continue to maintain this focus and implement some pilot action at a national level, one of which I will present shortly, our BEST project, which is the most significant national initiative aimed at validating best practices for potential work. To do this, of course, we stay on what you can read in this slide with main action and a monitoring and evaluation phase, of course, necessary, essential. I mentioned best practices a lot, and this is representatively the most important initiative at the national level. It's the first Italian experience that brings together social services, health services, top-tier sports organization like Atalanta, football team from Serie A, Volley Bergamo, volleyball team in the main Syria, two of the most significant sports clubs in the country, and law enforcement, of course, law enforcement agencies at territorial level, along with organizations like Specchio Magico, which is similar to a lot of incredible high skills and competent ISPCAN member organizations. So, quoting Frankenstein Jr., sorry for this, it could work. I started from here to introduce a definition, as the term often becomes complicated in local translation. In Italian, the word safeguarding is untranslatable because it intersects the concept of protection, of safety, of security, while also lacking a proactive dimension. So therefore, we decided to maintain the term in its international issue and its international meaning, as it allows for clarity in our application. Safeguarding means becomes the responsibility of an organization to ensure that its staff and programs don't cause harm to their athletes, protecting boys and girls from the risk of maltreatment and abuse. At the same time, it enables us to have an effective reporting system. Why are these standards so important? They allow us to ensure that our activities operate within a framework aimed at minimizing risks and making the experience as safe as possible. While we cannot completely eradicate risk, we must strive for the highest possible outcome. I like to refer to this as the attempt to achieve the next to impossible step. We need to create something that try to impact the next to impossible, getting as close as possible to an unattainable goal. This tendency drives us to become better and more equipped as possible. Of course, we work to ensure that we can respond promptly, appropriately to any potential issues while also providing point of reference. One of the critical point, which we will revisit during this presentation, is that a victim often finds it challenging to reach out for help, to ask for help. This request for assistance, this request for help can be the key to breaking the cycle of violence. This situation was masterfully represented by Paul's speech. The standard being adopted are quite simple and reference at international level, define this as the main 4 pillars, and I think this could be 4 criteria we need to maintain. These standards are outlined in a policy document that serves as a framework for defining best practices applied within specific contexts to protect minors in sport and to establish a chain of responsibility. This framework allows the implementation of procedures that ensure individuals and appropriately and correctly emphasizing accountability. It enables responsiveness, timeliness, effectiveness when faced with a situation of varying degrees of seriousness. It's not necessary to have a hierarchical scale of severity. The key issue is the ability to receive and respond to requests for help, allowing for a safe space, a safe space to manage those situations effectively. This stem of the chain of responsibility is the point I want to emphasize the most. As you know, the Italian volleyball team and national team has recently won a gold medal under the guidance of Julio Velasco, an incredible coach who is perhaps even more distinguished as a great philosopher, a mental coach, and motivator. In one of his famous sport metaphor, he speaks about responsibility. He notes that often within the sport environment, but not exclusively, there is a tendency to assign blame rather than accept responsibility. This frequently occurs when the emphasis shifts from personal mistakes to blaming others. He illustrates this reasoning by comparing volleyball to the idea of accountability in my mind. For example, a spiker complains about a poorly set ball from the setter. The setter in turn blames the passer for a bad pass. The passer might say that the James lighting blinded them at the moment of hitting the ball, thus attributing blame to the faulty lighting in position. Consequently, the person who arranged the light complains to the electrician, claiming that the lights were positioned incorrectly or are too bright for the players. And so on. This chain of blame never seems to end. This is the element through which we become apply. Anyone involved in an activity, whether in sports or not, become and create a complicity and hypocritically complies in pedophilia, abuse, maltreatment, mistreatment, violence, bullying, and everything that is unacceptable in a context like this. We become functional to a system that, through secrecy, sense of guilty, fear of speaking out, and fear of asking for help, foster a chain of disresponsibility. Therefore, the term of accountability is crucial. It's through this that we must absolutely engage and promote a culture of responsibility, of accountability. What are the advantages, the benefits? Very simple: the protection of our athlete and our staff. For a civil and maybe criminological perspective, adopting the policy provides us with a legal umbrella, a safety net for our sport organizations. Training, raising awareness, and promoting courses on responsibility within the organization, along with good procedures and practices, enable us to withstand potential accidents of negligence by a coach or a staff member. This means that we can demonstrate to judges, for example, that our organization has done everything possible to prevent such events. This creates a system where individuals become accountable for themselves, which is fundamental to a culture of responsibility. Additionally, this approach helps maintain a clean reputation and ensure that our commitment to safeguarding can be recognized externally. In the logic that Paul and I are promoting, these are various connections. There are various connections or remaining networks and relationships around our organization. So this should let us not only to remain close within our gates, but also to become a positive driver for our local community and context and territory. At this point, what are the keywords we want to highlight? I will try to provide with a quick overview of what we believe represents our work on these issues. Therefore, we have policies, procedures, and continuous risk management through a risk assessment or maybe a management of risk. These are standards for recruitment, and we need to have standards for recruitment, which encompass everything related to personal selection, the initial phase of staff onboarding, how they should interact and who they should relate it to. It's crucial to establish their training process, early identification of issues, and how to manage reports. What practices can help me understand, intercept, and report incidents? How do I promote a healthy environment for fair play and ensure that my code of conduct reflect the value of the Convention of the Right of the Child? We are approaching the centenary of the Geneva Declaration in 2024, marking a historical significant moment when there will be a renewal of commitment from member states at the community level, not only signatories of the United Nations Convention regarding the rights of children, at the same time promoting their participation, inclusivity, accessibility, and empowerment is essential. From my perspective, which has focused on primary prevention in school and beyond for the past 20 years, I find it somewhat surprising to reflect on these numbers. Through equipping and delivering protective skills to children, we can establish a well-structured safeguarding system in realities like yours, where, well, in reality, like the ISPCAN members audience, we have very high point of excellence all around the world. So I don't see any particularly difficult to implement and upload something like this. On the contrary, I view it as necessary, and I see many professionals and organizations ready to make it a reality. Ultimately, it all comes down to the stories. We cannot underestimate the fact that statistics tell us how many cases exist, while investigation reveal prevalent phenomena. All the studies, research, and daily work help us better understand these issues. However, when it happens to you, when your child is involved, or when an athlete, your athlete in your organization, you are in the under % of case directly impact. In such instance, theoretical support may not be enough. What you truly need are practical points of support, resources, and leverage to help you navigate an incredibly complex circuit of victimization. Paul has shared how complex his life story has been, and I thank him every single time because he also allowed us to explore numerous profiles of his development and his journey toward reorganizing his life, nurturing himself, and engaging in ethical and civic commitment. This represents another step forward. However, we must not underestimate that the more we provide protective skills, as well as way for requesting help, support, and reporting, such as prevention and protection, the better we will be at intercepting these phenomena early, stopping them as soon as possible, and perhaps in various cases serving as a lifeline for those specific situations. Recently, Paul and I presented a workshop dedicated to safeguarding sports at the ISPCAN Sweden Congress in Uppsala. We had extraordinary contribution from Alexandra Richard from the EFL, the English Football League, and most important international football league, and the new director of the youth sector of Atalanta, Roberto Saden, who is a pioneer in these issues and has decided to address the topic of safeguarding in a highly structured and effective manner. Turning to Italy, as I approach the conclusion of my speech, I want to further explain how to have moved forward. We have created the first Italian national study on the prevalence and incidence of abuse and mistreatment, maltreatment, and abuse in sport, using methodology from Professor Mike Hartill from Edge Hill University and extraordinary European studies, voices, and cases. We use this methodology to have a quantitative and qualitative cross-section of what will be the Italian findings to better study the phenomenon. This is a first step and certainly a preliminary and improvable study, but it represents a significant response to certify that the phenomenon exists and is extremely present. Change the Game, the organization with Terre des Hommes and the sport department lead this path related to data collection. That is a very strong and important key for a government delivery. Within our initiative, we launched Break the Silence, Battiamo il Silenzio in Italian, a ministerial portal from the Department of Sport that has facilitated the birth of new sports legislation, which mandates sports clubs to adopt measures reflecting the needs of minors. This represents a meeting point for all clubs at the national level, as inspired Sport Federation to create their own training and policy adoption pathways. I have brought some element on which I will briefly focus, including what we have observed and the intervention we have implemented. We start from a sample, 1.5 thousand athletes, and you can see age, gender, and a disability rate in order to have a good representation of the population. And then we interview them starting from the positive aspect of sport experience in their life and what were the level, international, national, regional, club, or amateur, because the pro are the most exposed in our findings. And then we try to map, to define, to describe the prevalence of violence against children. And this is the data: psychological violence at 30.4, as physical violence at the second, neglect and sexual violence with a very important rate in my mind, and the description where humiliation, where punishment, where abuse, where a way that it described as a methodology masquerade, or a violence masquerade by methodology. And this is the main findings related to psychological violence, as you can see. But even when children has been forced to play, participate while injured, for example, or subjected to erotic, obscene, or sexual comments. The prevalence of the interpersonal violence in relation to competitive level is quite simple to read, because the concentration of violence against children is proportional to the level, and the characteristic of this interpersonal violence underlined that the respondent stated that all started before 14 years old. At the same time, the duration has been described in this slide. As Paul shared with us, it can be very strong and with an incredible duration during the years, through years. In this slide, you can see the characteristic of perpetrators who have teammates, coach, trainer, instructor, teammate unknown, and other sports professional create all perpetrators. And so we are focusing on the main experience of sports with all figures involved and all context: sports facilities, changing rooms, showers, and medical physiotherapy treatment rooms. So we have the entire situation we can experience during a sport experience, of course, that can be an exposition of child abuse and neglect. A request for support is the main key in my mind, because as you can see, around 50%, and if we had that the searching for support but not receiving it adds another 10-15%, we are in a very high percentage of not receiving, not asking, not being supported in any way. Consequences: drop out, of course, left the sport world, change sport, change organization, and I don't want to stay on long-term and medium-term and short-term consequences of child abuse, because we are in a niche context. So I know that we are all aware of the worst part of this. I would like to stay on the main sport impact in this case. So back to the point, in this context, we aim to construct a community-based model, reproducible and scalable at a national level. We started with important club, as I said, like Atalanta, as you can see, in Volley Bergamo, to have a significant promotional and marketing impact. They have been essential as they allow us to establish initial agreements with law enforcement, public health services, social services, local authorities, and municipalities, while also trying to implement safeguarding system at the local level. The initiatives from Atalanta and Volley Bergamo serve as a starting point from which we saw the territorial diffusion of best be saved together through a local, so little organization. Ernesto, you can see this coach pointing to horizon, a very incredible driver at local level. And we start from 9 clubs, then expanded to 12 and finally to 15. And nowadays we are able to reach more than 100 coaches in our training session. We train all the staff and the families and provided them with a shared policy framework within which altogether adopted standard for the protection and safeguarding of minors. Within this experience, we include a shared code of conduct and sign a manifesto for protected, healthy, and safe sport. We also created a sort of consultancy service for cases, allowing all the involved clubs to turn to us, Specchio Magico and law enforcement, for advice on how to best handle disclosure and reporting phases, ensuring impeccable procedures to support those who have spoken up. Below, you can see some photos from the presentation and the initial informational session in Atalanta, Volley Bergamo. However, the most important aspect for us was the involvement of Paul, of course, who served as a key testimony in the best experience with local clubs. This concept of a local community become a protected community within sports environment was highlighted during our remarkable evening of great intensity. It's an honor to have shared this extraordinary journey with you today. In this remarkable setting, I cannot help but thank you for your hospitality and the enormous opportunity to present our humble and small experience in this incredible adventure that ISP can represent for me and for a lot of members all around the world. Thank you, Jane. Perfect as usual. And I think that great revolutions are achieved thanks to great pioneers. So we see what we want to see and we see what we are able to recognize. Equipping sport organization, it's a way to create a culture and then visibility and then potentiality for disclosure. I greet and thank you all with this quote from Galileo Galilei. It's not enough to look, you need to look with eyes that want to see, that believe in what I say. Thank you so much again.
A sincere thank you to Rocco for filming that ahead of time. I know he was very remorseful for not joining us live today. If there are any questions that we're not able to answer that are in the Q&A now from Rocco's presentation, I will make sure we get that to him. So if you want to also put your contact information, he can reach back out with an answer. And now it is truly, truly my honor to turn the session over to Paul Stewart.
Thanks, Jane. I'm just going to share a screen, guys. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Incredible individual, Rocco. I've been working with him now for some time, and his determination and his knowledge is second to none. So it's a real pleasure just to follow him. I think my session today will hopefully bring home why we are all on this incredible webinar. I'm 1 second. Sorry, guys. It's just catching up. As I was introduced, I'm a former professional footballer. I was very lucky to play 600 and odd games, most of them at the top level. Played for some incredible teams, Manchester City, Tottenham Hotspur. I was lucky at Tottenham Hotspur to play in an FA Cup final many years ago. And it was a child's dream to play in an FA Cup final. Moreover, I was lucky to score and we went on to win that FA Cup. I then went on to play for an incredible team called Liverpool. Even more fortunate to represent my country at all levels, which culminated in I guess the highest accolade a footballer can get, which was 3 full caps for my country. Now, looking at the stats on that career, it looks impressive. What will be very shocking for most of you is that, unfortunately, I didn't enjoy the experience. My football career was fraught with problems on and off the football field. This was when I disclosed this was on the news in 2016.
The sex abuse scandal in football continues to snowball as more former players come forward and more offenders are named.
Footballers. Paul Stewart, a former Tottenham, Liverpool and England player, is the latest and most high-profile ex-player to waive his anonymity.
Paul Stewart with a chance for Spurs. The equaliser!
Paul Stewart was one of English football's leading strikers, scoring here in the 1991 FA Cup final. But behind the goals and the glamour, he hid a dark secret.
When I first started delivering sessions, I really didn't understand what safeguarding was. When I was young and playing, there was no such thing as safeguarding. It wasn't even a word. In fact, there was no duty of care to us. So I felt that I needed to go and educate myself around safeguarding. So I took all the qualifications that you can see on screen, which just give me that knowledge that when I'm delivering to audiences such as today, that I come with a bit of knowledge of safeguarding and what the landscape of safeguarding is. Since then, in the last 7 years, I've been working for some of the biggest organisations in the UK and abroad, the EFL, the Premier League, the FA. I've been to Italy, as you know, with Rocco. Recently, I was in Poland and Latvia. I work for the police in my hometown. I work with amateur clubs. I deliver at university and colleges. I do a bit of keynote speaking. I don't do an awful lot. I also provide advocacy. Some of my colleagues who struggled, as I did, but didn't really want to go public with their story, I often get called from football clubs to go in and chat with them. And to be honest, guys, we didn't talk about what happened to us as children. We often spoke about anything but we had a connection. And I think hopefully that connection just helped my colleagues to start a recovery process. I've also worked with care homes, specific care homes that house children that have been abused in the family setting. I've delivered to the DSLs and DSOs in them homes. I'm going to have to warn everyone on this call now that the next part of the session can be quite disturbing, some of the content. Please, your welfare is far more important than this session and what I say. So if you are struggle or do struggle with any of the content of the next part of the session, please feel free to leave the session, because as I say, it's far more important your well-being than what I'm about to deliver. I'm just going to stop sharing for this part of the session. Well, I was born in a place called Manchester, and we lived in I was at home with my two brothers and my mum and dad, and we lived in what we call on a council estate, which I guess to explain clear would be homes supplied by the government for families that can't afford to buy their own homes. The one that I was brought up on was called Wythenshawe Council Estate. It was the biggest council estate in Europe. We didn't have a lot of money, but I've got to be honest with you guys. I was probably one of the happiest, luckiest young children you'd ever wish to meet. Always had a smile on my face. I was always teasing my older two brothers, singing songs for my mum. I didn't have a care in the world. And the fact that we didn't have any money didn't really matter, because what we didn't know, we didn't really want for. What we did have, we had a love for one thing, and that was football. Ever since I could walk, all I ever wanted to be was a footballer. My dad, he didn't, as I say, we didn't have a lot of money, and my dad was out of work more than he was in work. My mum, she worked in a factory on a production line folding garments. But what my dad did, he watched every game that I played. And them statistics that I just showed you, my dad watched every one of them games, even when we traveled to Europe with teams like Tottenham and Manchester City. As a young boy, I showed good promise. I played for my school team, often for the year above. I played for my town team. I played for my county team. I had trials for England. And when you lived in Manchester, you either supported Manchester United or Manchester City. And all we did was we would emulate the stars of our favourite team when we played football. And we would often stay out from morning till late in the evening, till mum or dad would invite us or shout us in for our tea, or whether it was time for bed. I would just be just short of my 11th birthday, and I was playing for my school team. And my dad was stood on the touchline, as he always was, watching the game. And there was a football coach walking up and down the sidelines. And he was asking the parents who was the mum or dad of the young boy wearing number 10. Well, I was wearing number 10. But what my dad didn't realise is I knew who this coach was. He run or was in charge of one of the best teams in Manchester. And moreover, I'd heard that they went on exotic trips to America and to Ireland. Well, just so you understand that, as a family, we would be lucky if we would go for a day out as a holiday, or even luckier, maybe have 1 week in a caravan close to the home. So to travel to faraway places like America and Ireland was just unheard of in my family. Well, this coach asked my dad if Paul could come and play for him. I said straight away to my dad that I wanted to join. But the first thing my dad says that we would have to ask mum, because if there was any more pressure on the household budget, then unfortunately, Paul, you wouldn't be able to play. Well, the coach said straight away to my dad that it wouldn't cost anything. So I actually joined this football team the very next day. Within about 2 or 3 days of me joining the team, this football coach starts coming to our home, and he would be bringing gifts. The latest pair of football or soccer boots, the latest sportswear. And he would be saying to my parents, what a good player Paul is. I think he's got a really good chance of making it as a footballer. Well, just so you understand, to get the latest pair of football boots in our home was unheard of. I was the youngest of three, so I would have to wait until what we call hand-me-downs for my two older brothers to get football boots. So it was incredible that this coach was bringing these football boots and sportswear to our home, telling my parents how good at footballer Paul is, and he's got a great chance of making it as a professional. Within a week of me joining the club, this coach now, he starts turning up at my school. And if he didn't give me a ride home, he would follow me in the car. And if he saw me talking to any of my school colleagues, when I got in the car, he would question why I was talking to them. He would say to me, I don't want you mixing with anyone from school. He said, if you want to be a footballer, you have to be really dedicated. Well, I just thought that what he was saying must be right because he was associated with a professional football club. So I didn't really think anything of it. After about a week, if he wasn't picking me up from school, he was at home when I got home from school, and he would be sat on the sofa like part of the family, saying to my parents, what a good player Paul is. I think he's got a good chance of making it. Well, I didn't have a care in the world. This was great. Everything was fabulous. I had new football boots. He didn't just bring presents for me. He brought them for my brothers, for my parents. And I just thought everything was really good. After about a week, he started taking a few of the football team out during the week. And what I mean by out, he would take us after school. He would take us to the pitches. He would take us 10-pin bowling, or he would take us to what we call speedway. It was a big sport in the 70s in the UK. He would take about 4 or 5 of us, but he would always drop me off last. And when I was in the car alone with him, he would start making sexual innuendos. He would tell me dirty jokes. He would ask me if I masturbated the night before. Well, I was very uncomfortable with these questions, and because I was so young, I didn't really understand what he was saying to me. But I remember that he insisted on me giving him an answer. So what I did was I would make anything up just to get out of that uncomfortable scenario that I was in. So I would say yes once, twice, and I just felt so uncomfortable, and he just was insisting on this answer. I just made something up. Well, I didn't think too much about it, apart from, do I tell my dad that this has been asked? Do I tell my dad that he's asking this? Well, maybe it's nothing, maybe it's something and nothing, and I shouldn't think about it too much. Well, as I said, by now, this coach has become part of the family. As I say, if he's not at school, he's at home when I get home. My parents think there's nobody like him. I'm still this happy-go-lucky kid because I think I've got everything. I've got new sportswear. My parents are getting presents that they couldn't afford. He's telling them that I'm going to be a footballer. I'm still this happy-go-lucky kid thinking this is unbelievable. After about 3 weeks, he takes us, a number of us, down to a professional football club. And we would represent this football club and play against local teams in the area. On my first journey, he asked, does anyone want to drive the car? Well, you can imagine as a young boy of 10 years of age, as we all did, it was a real big look into the grown-ups world driving the car. What the driving the car consisted of was you would put one foot in the passenger side of the front seat, one foot in the driver's side, and you would sit where the handbrake was, and you would lean across the coach and steer the steering wheel. That was what constituted driving the car. Well, everybody had their turn. It came to my turn. I did exactly what I just said, one foot in the driver's side, one foot in the passenger's side. I sat where the handbrake was. And as I leant across the coach to drive the car, to steer the steering wheel, I felt a hand go up my shorts and touch my penis. To be honest, I froze. It seemed to happen so quickly. I wondered whether it was an accident because the coach was changing the gears in the car. I then thought about the questions about that he'd asked me and the dirty jokes and the sexual innuendos that he'd told me, and I was really confused. And my first thought was, I really can't tell my dad now. If I tell my dad what's just happened, my dad will kill him, he will go to prison, and I'll lose my dad. So I chose not to say anything. But by now, my personality is starting to change. I'm starting to become very wary of this coach. And the reason is when I was alone with him, he was completely different than he was when he was with my parents. When he was with my parents, he was constantly telling them how good a footballer I was. He was bringing presents for them. In all honesty, back in the mid-70s, he bought our first colour TV, which was unheard of. So I didn't want my brothers or my parents not to get the presents, so I chose not to say anything. But my personality, I'm starting to become withdrawn, very frightened of saying anything because of the repercussions. And I'm sort of changing from this happy-go-lucky kid to someone who doesn't really know what to do. After about 4 weeks, this coach is, as I say, if he's not picked me up from school, he's at home when I get home. This particular evening, we were sat on the sofa and he said, right, Paul, we need to do some extra training. And I can't remember what excuse he used, whether it was to practice heading, to practice left foot or right foot. Well, my parents just thought it was great. They thought, hey, this coach is now prepared to take Paul for some extra training to help him with his career. What that extra training consisted of was being driven to a secluded spot close to my home, whereby I was sexually abused for the first time. When he finished abusing me, he leant across and he whispered in my ear. He said, if you tell your mum or your brothers, I will kill them. And he said, if you want to be a footballer, this is what you have to do. From that day, I was then both physically and sexually abused every day of my life for a 4-year period. Not a day would go by that I wasn't sexually abused, but also depending on the coach's mood, he would beat me prior to abusing me. And he would beat me if he ever saw me interacting with my family, if he saw me engaging with my brothers, if he saw me showing love and affection to my parents. When I got in the car, I would get a beating before I was sexually abused. Now, I can understand, and perhaps as we're looking for signs and symptoms, how you would think, surely my parents should have spotted something, the bruises, you know, the marks on my body. Well, I came from a family of 2 older brothers. We played football all the time on the estate with the lads, and bruises wouldn't really be picked up on. And he was very, very clever in the way that he physically abused me. He would bend my fingers back. He would hit me in the throat with his hand. He would punch me in the arms and legs. So it didn't really give my parents any excuse to notice it. I've now gone from this outgoing, happy, vivacious young boy to hardly speaking. And I think what I was trying to do was just protect myself from the beatings. I knew that I was going to get sexually abused, but what I wanted to do was hopefully, if I didn't speak, then maybe it would not give him an excuse to beat me prior to the sexual abuse. Now, when I say I didn't speak, that isn't entirely true. What I would do, I wouldn't engage with anyone. If they asked me a question, I would give them a direct answer, but I wouldn't embellish on the answer. And as I say, I think that was a way to try and protect myself from the beatings prior to the sexual abuse. There were a couple of occasions, and again, perhaps, you know, it was a cry for help from me, but there were a couple of occasions where my mum and dad walked in our house because this coach ended up living with us. Walked in our house and I was crying on the sofa because I'd been sexually abused. And I was just praying that mum or dad would notice that there was something wrong. But these people are so manipulative, and he was very clever at talking them round and saying that Paul's crying because he doesn't think he's going to become a footballer. He's so desperate to make it, that's why he's crying. And my heart would just sink. My heart would just sink. Those trips to America and Ireland that I referred to earlier, we went to both countries on 4 occasions. And we actually used to go in this, well, we have 6 weeks holidays in a school break when I was at school, and we would go for them 6 weeks, and we would stay with what we call host families. And they would be the families of the teams that invited us over. And when we went, he would make sure that he would bring either one or both of my brothers. And when we got to the destination, even though my parents had never said anything to him, he would go to the family that I was staying with, and he would tell them that my parents had requested that he stay with me because I get homesick and I'm frightened of being away from home. And not only did he have to stay with me, he had to stay in the same room as me. And the reasons for bringing one or both of my brothers was to hold a threat over me. He would say to me when we were in America or Ireland that we were thousands of miles away from home, nobody can do anything. If I say anything, he would kill my brother or brothers. So them trips to America and Ireland that I was so looking forward to as a child, they became an absolute living hell. And it wasn't so easy back in the mid-70s to just pick up the phone and call home and say there was a problem. And to give you an idea of how distant it was, unlike today with technology, when we got to America, we would write a postcard and send it home straight away. And we would actually arrive home 6 weeks later prior to the postcard arriving. So contact between the countries was so difficult. As I said, I've now become a shadow of my former self. I'm not talking. I've become withdrawn. In fact, and this I think again is it would have been a sign and symptom that we look out for today. But my auntie noticed it and said to my mum, "What's up with Paul? He doesn't want to speak anymore. He doesn't want to come anywhere. Is everything okay?" Well, this coach was able to convince them that because I was so desperate to be a footballer and that's all I'm thinking about, and he thinks he's not going to make it, and that he was just able every time to convince them that it was something other than what was really happening. As I said, the abuse continued until I was just short of my 15th birthday. I was, I guess, becoming stronger, more physical, probably more petulant. What I've learned now is that these individuals have a sexual age preference. So he was probably looking at his next target, but I just couldn't take any more. You know, I'd felt that my life was falling apart. I didn't speak. I didn't enjoy anything. I was so sad. And I just said, I can't take it anymore. And what he would usually do was when he was driving the car, he would reach across to touch me. This particular time, I decided that I wasn't going to take it anymore. So as he reached across, I pushed his arm away. I opened the car door and he slammed on the brakes. I got out the car and I just ran as fast as I could. And I ran all the way home. I do often get asked how far and where I ran from. But as you can probably understand, I don't go back to my familiar home for obvious reasons. It holds a lot of heartache and pain for me. But that day, what I do know was I just had to escape this monster. What I'd love to say to you guys now is that from then on, the abuse stopped. I went on to have this wonderful football career where I'm playing for my country, playing at Wembley, winning cups, trophies, and living the life of a glittering sports star. But I would only be lying to you. I've actually been addicted to Class A drugs on 2 occasions, whereby I've had to seek professional help. I've had drink problems, relationship problems. I suffer from depression. And we know that mental health is big in society and the world today, and rightly so. And I think we all suffer depression in different ways. For me, it's like a dark cloud that's maybe a couple of miles away, and I can feel this dark cloud coming towards me. And as it's coming towards me, I'm starting to struggle to think straight, and I'm struggling to sleep. And by the time it's over my head, I don't think anything rational. I can't think rationally. I can't sleep. I detach myself from a family whereby I'm not speaking to them. I also suffer from suicidal thoughts. I've actually attempted to take my own life on 2 occasions. I would have been married 36 years this year. I have 3 children. I have a son, Adam, who's 38 years of age. I have 2 daughters, Chloe and Jade. Chloe's 35, and I still call her the baby Jade. She's 27. I think it's a parent's God-given right to be able to cuddle, nurture, and tell their children how much they love them. I've never done that with my children. I've never been able to. In fact, all I've done is heap devastation on my family. I was never there for special birthdays. Never the dad who was outside school waiting for his children to run into his arms. Never there to meet the teachers and parents' evening. Where was I? I was taking drugs in a pub. I was either drunk in a pub. I don't think people understand really the impact that abuse has, not just on the individual, but the impact of the actions of that individual that they have on their family. I hate to have to tell you this now, but I said I would have been married 36 years this year. Unfortunately, I lost my wife 4 years ago to cancer. In her last year, I had to care for her 24/7. My wife went to a grave without her husband being able to say, I love you. Because what happens is you're devoid of the ability to show emotion, to show love, to trust, because it's taken away from you as a child. And what will shock everybody on this call is the abuse. While it was happening to me as a child wasn't the worst. It honestly wasn't the worst, because I was able to deal with that, and we call it child accommodation syndrome. I was able to deal with it by, when it was happening, pretend I was playing at my favourite football ground, pretend I was playing for my favourite football team. The actual impact that it's had on my adult life has been far worse than the abuse while it was happening. I guess, and I say this all the way along, you know, I expected to take this story to my grave. I wasn't going to tell anyone. And then 2016 came along, and I saw an article in a newspaper, and it was a boy that had been abused as a young child, a footballer. I didn't really know him, but reading his story was like reading my own life story. And the journalist that wrote the story left his contact details at the bottom of the article in the form of an email. And I felt compelled to support this young boy, or this adult now. So I started an email back to this newspaper. My name is Paul Stewart. I'm a former international footballer. I played for some of the top teams. And then I realized that I was going to tell the nation. And in fact, the story, when it came out, went global, but the nation, that what had happened to me as a young child, I hadn't even told my wife, my children. Moreover, I hadn't told my parents. So I didn't send that email, and I took that time to go home to talk to my wife. And my wife supported me resoundingly. She said, I support you in whatever you feel you need to do. She knew that I'd had problems, but she'd never put the two and two together and realized it was something in my childhood. To be honest with you, my children were angry. And I think they were angry because they felt that this individual who'd abused their father had taken away their childhood because of my actions. And honestly, I don't make excuses for my actions. Nobody forced me to take the drugs that I took. Nobody poured the drink down my neck. But what it did do with my children, it just gave them that bit of understanding of why Dad was like he was. I think the difficulty was, and I wouldn't wish this journey on any son or daughter, was the 2-mile journey that I had to make to my parents to break the devastating news that the coach that they'd invited into our home, but as I said, not only invited into our home, he ended up living with us, had abused their son over a 4-year period. My dad said exactly what I thought he'd say. Son, if I'd known, I would have killed him. My mum supported me, as did my wife, but my mum had seen some of the messes that I'd got myself into when I used to drink and do drugs, because my wife often would kick me out of the familiar home and I would go and stay with my parents. But they didn't really put two and two together and realize it was something that had happened as a child. I thought that out by waiting the weekend, speaking, and then going public. What I didn't really know is the impact it would have on my parents, My parents were healthy in their mid-70s when I told them. My dad's health deteriorated instantaneously. My mum called me after about 6 months, and she said, "I'm going to be honest with you, son. Your dad doesn't sleep anymore. He has nightmares all the time. He's fighting in his sleep and he's wandering around the house." And she said, "Son, when I go to sleep, all I see is his face. When I wake up, all I see is his face." I think sometimes we need to understand the real implications of what abuse can do, not just to the individual, but how it can impact on the whole family. I'm just going to come back to the presentation now. Thank you for that. We'll just give it a minute. Hopefully it starts quickly. Just some of the signs and symptoms. I show this photo because you see me there as a young child, happy-go-lucky, not a problem in the world. The one at the top is a family that I stayed with in America. And this was one of the families that he went to and said that he had to stay there as well. Well, they decided that they would write a letter to my mum and dad. And what they wrote in the letter was, "We think you should keep your eye on the coach." But they didn't embellish any further than that. And what happened again, he was able to convince my parents that they didn't know what they were on about. They were talking rubbish and that they were just causing trouble. And again, the opportunity was missed. I show this slide because everything that you can see on that circle is what I suffered with. We talked earlier about the change in personality from this happy-go-lucky boy to not speaking hardly. I was wet in the bed till I was 15. I didn't engage with people. What I think we need to look at, those that work in this field, when I talk about the new clothes and presents, if you are working with children that don't ordinarily or wouldn't have the latest designer clothes, the latest designer sportswear, the latest designer shoes, then they start coming to your organization with this. There is a possibility that something isn't quite right within that child's background, and we need to explore it. We need to talk. We need to explore that everything's okay. If you're working with children and they're using language that is way above their age group, then you need to explore that something might be wrong in that child's background. Something might not be quite right. If they're becoming secretive, if they're becoming withdrawn but very clingy, if they're feared of places that particular places, it means that that's where they've been taken when they've been abused. And I show that because I think it's very important that we look out for these things. But one thing I will say and add to that, we can do all the courses, we can take all the exams, but I still believe that if you don't think it's right in your gut, if you look at something and you don't think it's right in your gut, you're probably right. There is something wrong. So please explore that something might not be quite right with that child. So why didn't I speak out? We know now that when a middle-aged man and you're 10 years of age threatens to kill your parents and your brothers, Trust me, you believe them. The gifts, we now know with the grooming process. And back when I was a child, they had to not just groom your parents, they used to have to groom your grandparents, your aunties and uncle, so that they could isolate you, so that they left you with, so you didn't feel you had anywhere to turn. For me, it was that power and control, because as a child, I genuinely believed that the coach that was abusing me had the gift to give or take away the only thing that I ever wanted to be, which was a professional footballer. And I had that fear of not making it as a professional footballer. When I started as a young boy at my professional football club, when I was 16 or 17, why didn't I speak out then? Well, we didn't have safeguarding officers. We didn't have welfare officers. We didn't have child protection. So you had to grow up early. And I didn't want the coaches at the football club I was at to think I was a problem. So I kept it quiet. I remember being really angry, really, and my disciplinary record was really, really bad. And then when I went to play on for Tottenham, Manchester City, and all them teams, why didn't I say anything then? Well, it's embarrassing when you're talking as a 24-year-old, 25-year-old. It's really embarrassing. But as I say, guys, the impact it's had on my adult life has been probably the most impactful and devastating. Please let me turn a light on, because in England it goes darker. Look. Hopefully that's a little better. Sorry about that, guys. I'm back. Sorry. So yes, the impact that the abuse has had, not just on my adult life, on those loved ones around me, and my actions, how it has impacted on them, has been far worse than anything. The next video I want to show you guys is really, and this is heartbreaking, because I've only started showing this video this year in my deliveries, but you need to know when I talk about my parents and the demise in their health. I know that me coming forward in 2016 contributed to two things. My dad, who passed away on April the 4th. His health from 2016 just deteriorated so badly. And I know it contributed. I know that my dad felt guilty. I know that he thought he should have protected me. As much as I tried to say it wasn't their fault, I know it impacted them. But moreover, my mum lives with my older brother and his wife. There is no history of Alzheimer's or dementia in my family. I go and see my mum now, and she doesn't recognize me. She doesn't know who I am. And I'm sure that that's the decision that I made when I was 52 to come forward. But this is my mum when she took part in a documentary in the UK. And just so you know, this is how the experience, how what happened to me impacted on my mum. I was 52 at the time, and most of my life had passed me by with struggles, and in the faint hope that I could perhaps live the rest of my life out in some sort of solace, I felt that I needed to tell my mum and dad before it went public. They lived 2 miles away from me. It was just the most difficult drive. A son shouldn't have to make a drive like that.
I'll never, till the day I die, get any of this out of my mind. It'll haunt me now. I just think I should have known something. I've got to set this to the grave with me. I don't sleep. It's on my mind as I go to bed, and it's still on my mind. The little bit of sleep that I get as soon as I wake up, that's the first thing that on my mind. Is he all right? You know, is he still getting all right? And is he doing all right? Just one of them things that I think a mother should know, and I didn't.
My mum will act tough. So guys, I suppose now I'd like to share with you, you can obviously see from and hear from my delivery what spurs me on to do the work that I do. This project I'm working with alongside Rocco. We hope to launch it in Italy, certainly after Christmas or some point thereon. We've just released it in the UK. And it's a quality mark. We call it Safeguarding Fundamentals. It's 8 easy steps. My partner is Antonia Noble, a barrister of 30 years, a safeguarding specialist. Antonia's forgot more than I will ever know in the realms of safeguarding. And we both share the same drive. We want to make sure that we can eradicate and make sure that children are safe from harm and enjoy the sports or the activities that they are involved with. It's called the Safe Silver, Fundamental Safe Silver. And we require the 8 simple standards. And what we've done with this initiative, we've made it very simple. We've used videos from experts, because I think sometimes we can get lost with safeguarding. It becomes more complicated than it needs to be. So all we require is that the organisation has a policy. It has procedures that follow them policies. It has a welfare officer and safeguarding officer. It has a code of conduct policy. It has safe recruitment, which is very important. That the people within the organisation working with children are doing the safeguarding training. And I think requirement 7, it reassures, your parents and carers. We need to reassure them that we've got everything in place. Moreover, we need to empower them children and give them a voice. Don't forget, they're the ones that take part in this activity. It's not for us as adults to say what should happen. It's for the children to have that voice. And you will never hear me call them footballers, athletes, sportsmen, sportswomen. Not when they're, young children. They have greater needs than what athletes and sportspersons do. That comes later on. We need to understand when we're working with these children that they are children and they have complex needs in a lot of cases that we need to make sure that we are adhering to. But moreover, we need to empower them, give them that power to enjoy, make the organisation, the sports club that they're in safe, so that they feel safe, they feel that they can speak, and they are safe from any harm whatsoever. And any organisation that works with children can become involved. And our aim is not just to share this through the UK. As I say, we will be trialling it in Bergamo in Italy. I've already delivered in Latvia and spoke about it, and Poland. And for me, I think it's very simple. Why would you want this quality mark? Well, for me, there are 3 major reasons, and I think the most important reasons. If an organisation has got everything in place, it's showing a real commitment to what safeguarding is, and that their organisation wants to keep their children safe. They want to keep them free from harm. Secondly, It will reassure a parent that's leaving their child at that organisation that they've done everything they possibly can to keep the child safe. We know that we're never going to be 100% safe, but we can make sure we do everything in our power to keep these people out. And that's what I say in number 3. It will act as a deterrent. If these people that want to perpetrate abuse, of any sort, whether it's bullying or whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's racial abuse, they will see our quality mark and they will know that they will not be able to get away with it at that organisation. And if we can come together and make sure that this is a recognised quality mark, then I genuinely believe it will make children safer, it will deter the individuals, and it will reassure parents that everything has been done at your organisations to make the children safe. I'm fortunate that a lot of my sporting colleagues have helped me and supported me as ambassadors. And to be honest with you, they come together because they were shocked when I came forward in 2016. They thought, of all people, it wouldn't be me that would be one that would come forward. So they want to make sure that the future generations are safe. So they are supporting everything I do with this initiative. The organisations now that we've got on board, there are just a few that we're delighted to have on board. A lot of the professional football clubs, the charity from Lady Diana. The list is endless. And if I'm honest with you, it has been received incredibly over in the UK. And I'm proud to be a part of this initiative with Antonia. I also developed, and this is another thing that I'm doing with Rocco in Italy, and we should have the Safeguarding in Sport for Italy released in the new year. I developed one in the UK, which the Football League took on board and adopted it. So everyone that works with children in a professional sports club in the Football League has to mandatory take this course. And it just delves a bit deeper into the educational side of training in sport. And the good thing, the course is free. And I think it's more extensive than any course that's out there, especially if you're working in a sports setting. I told you that I'd played at Wembley. I played for England and have England caps at all levels. I have a golden boot for scoring 30 goals at Manchester City. I have an FA Cup winners medal, 2 championship medals, 2 Charity Shield medals. The list is endless. It probably won't surprise you now that none of them are on show in my home, because I paid too high a price to achieve their medals and trophies and caps. It really wasn't worth it. I'm more proud of the achievements over the last few years. I was awarded a doctorate, as you heard, from Salford University 2 years ago for my contribution to safeguarding. And then last summer, I was given the highest accolade in the Football League for my contribution to safeguarding. And I wrote a book in 2017 called Damaged. And that book is probably an extension of the story that I've told you today. It's about a young boy's journey from the age of 10, right through the abuse, right through his football career, through marriage, the problems he encountered along the way. But more importantly, it has inserts from my family, from my wife, from my parents, how the abuse affected them and impacted their lives. So I'm more proud of those 3 things than any of the medals and trophies that I have, because I just won't put them on show because they represent too much heartache and pain. I'd like to thank Jane, Pragati, ISCAN for everything that they do. I'm proud to be a part of the organisation and do my little bit. because what we want to do, and we're on the same mission. We want to eradicate abuse. Children. I mean, as adults, we are duty bound to make sure that we make the organizations, the places where our children go and realize their dreams as safe as we possibly can. And with your help and with organizations like IFSCAN, I know that we will do it. And Agity and I said prior to this webinar that we just don't accept no. We'll go knock on everyone's door until we knock that door down. Thank you.
Paul, thank you so much for sharing your story. I want to send you the chat after this session because I hope you feel the overwhelming amount of love and respect for sharing your journey with us. And again, your story invokes love, fear, anger, but at the end of it, it's your resolve that I think gives us all hope that you could take this horrible situation and the repercussions it's had on your life and your parents, your wife, your children, and still be sitting in front of us today with this resolve to have us, move forward and do better and protect children, in these places of sport and safeguard them anywhere they live and play. And so I can't really express enough gratitude. And when we had the gift of you in Edinburgh, I think that we knew that this is a mission of ours to create this working group around safeguarding to further disseminate your message and your story and your journey. And again, and your mission with Rocco to really bring some powerful, powerful tools forward. If you're feeling up to it, we do have a few questions,
Yeah.
we totally understand.
I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you.
I do
Just a
want to
quick-
make sure that everyone knows I'll put the recording of this webinar on our website. So if you further want to disseminate Paul's impact, that you'll have that option from the recording, his contact information, his program that he and Rocco are moving forward with. And again, that's all open access and free of charge. So that will be available to everyone in the follow-up and on the website. So Paul, I know the question that you tend to get a lot is, what happened to your perpetrator?
Well, when I first came forward in 2016, when the police interviewed me, they were trying to find where he was. They'd heard that he'd gone to New Zealand and Thailand. What we weren't aware was, because his name was Frank Roper, or we knew him as Frank Roper, but he'd been arrested in the mid-60s for sexual offences. And when he came out of prison, his actual middle name was Frank and his first name was James. So whilst they were looking for a Frank Roper, they couldn't find him. Then they realized that his name was James Francis Roper. And when it took about 3 or 4 weeks for them to track him down, unfortunately, I guess, he passed away in a hospice in 2005. Now, I think more than me, for my family, they were heartbroken because they wanted to see retribution for the father, because of what he'd been through. But when I came forward in 2016, I vowed that whether he was alive, dead, or where he was, it wouldn't affect me anymore because he'd had so much hold over my life for so many years. I vowed that he wouldn't do it anymore. So the fact that he died, the fact that I didn't get my day in court or whatever, didn't matter to me because I knew that I would be unable to change the past. I just felt that I have this opportunity with the platform that I have to try and make an impact on the future. So for me, it was more about the future, and what happened to him really was of no consequence. But you can understand why my wife and children would be angry because they wanted really to see him go to prison because he was prolific in the amount of young children that he abused.
I'm so sorry that you never had that reckoning, but again, he no longer had power over you is
No,
the
and
message that you're
that's
sending
what I
around.
needed. I needed to lose that power and what I mean by the power is, you know, still the impact of the abuse was going on through me taking drugs, through me going missing and for days on end, through the way that I was acting with my children, not being able. So that hold was still there, and I had to get rid of that hold. So if I'd have been worried about the fact that he passed away, then that just gives him that more of a hold over me. So, you know, it was of no consequence to me, Jane, that he'd passed away, because I was refusing for him to have that hold over me anymore.
Thank you, Paul. There was a question in regards to, as you and Rocco begin to help sports organizations get safeguarding in place, how do you push back against this culture of acceptable amounts of either verbal abuse or physical abuse in the spirit of toughening up athletes, or just this pervasive culture that some of it is acceptable to push people to their highest performance? Obviously, what happened to you crossed that line. But, is there,
I don't accept it, and you've got to understand that I was brought up on that exact basis, so when I was making my way in football, it was acceptable for a coach to be abusive, to be honest, but it isn't acceptable in no circumstance, what I know for a fact, and I say this all the time to the children that I talk to: listen, if you've got a problem, please come and talk to us. I tell them about my story, but I also say, look, I don't care how big the story, how big the problem is. It may be homework, it may be a problem at home. Come and talk to us, because I know that if that child is coming into, so let's say, football with a smile on his face, and all he's thinking about is the training session ahead with no other things on his mind, he's going to play better anyway, because he's happy, he's in a good place, he feels he's safe, or she feels, that they're safe. So it's just not acceptable for the bullying, for the shouting. That is not how we get the best out of top youngsters. I think we get the best out of them is by making their surroundings safe, making them feel that if they've got an issue, whatever how big or small it is, they've got someone to talk to. Then they're coming in to do their sport or their dancing or whatever that may be, with only that one thing in mind, and they're doing it because happy children make successful children, in my opinion.
well said. And this idea of grooming, it was very obvious that not only were you being groomed, but that your family was being groomed. And you said in some cases, multi-generations, for these victim athletes were being groomed. And so part of your ways to help parents recognize what's happening and to, protect their children is, do you give tips on how do you realize you're being groomed as a support family?
First and foremost, Jen, if your child is spending an inordinate amount of time with a coach alone, then that's part of the grooming. If they're bringing presents around, the problem we have, Jane, today, I think, and I have to say, because part of the sessions that I do when I do the whole session is around social media. Now, social media is where the dangers, where these people are operating today, because the conversion rate in the UK is, I think, at 2%, because as we know, children retract their statements, because often what happens is the authorities will take the child away from the family, and he might, or she might be, excuse me, from brothers and sisters, but they get taken away. So what they do is they retract the statement and they will go back into the family setting because they want to be with the brothers and sisters. So there is no conviction rate. If they are convicted, they go into prison and they get segregated. And what they do is they're with like-minded individuals, and all they talk about is what they got up to on the outside. So when they do get released, they're ready to reoffend. Now, they are working twice as hard as we are to access our children. There's nothing surer than that, and finding ways. And the new way is this social media. I think the statistics say that when they contact somebody on social media, there's actual physical contact within 6 weeks. So they're not having to groom the mums, the dads, their aunties, their uncles, because they have this access to a tool that we could have used to educate people around safeguarding. They're using this tool. It's a minefield for them to operate to access the children. So, you know, this is why the work that we do will always evolve, because they are using different methods to access and gain access to our children. And if we ever get where we think we've got it right, we're probably at our most vulnerable, because that's when they will find other ways and means. So the presence, the grooming that happened when I was a child, Jane, doesn't exist anymore, because we have this phenomenon called social media, and these apps can be very, very dangerous.
How tragic it's actually become easier for a child to fall victim in these situations. And then, Paul, part of your program, if I understood correctly, was helping kids, empowering them to be, to have their own personal safety front of mind in these scenarios. And so I was curious what that looks like. And two, looking back, is there something that could have made you feel more empowered to either get out of the situation, or like as you're developing this program, what did you consider in regards to protecting their personal safety, the athletes themselves?
I think if I go back to my generation as a child, first and foremost, the mentality was to sweep it under the carpet. Even parents in some cases didn't really want to think it's happening, and they would often believe the adult rather than the child. So the child then feels that they've nowhere to go. They can't say anything because nobody believes them. And it was a taboo subject, as you know. I mean, to talk about it would have been really unheard of back then. These people are so clever as well. They become the nicest people you wish to meet. We have this false idea that they wear raincoats and they're scruffy, and you can pick them out a mile. They actually are the most trusted people in the organizations. So they will infiltrate, become the nicest person, and in fact, to the point where people will go, definitely wouldn't be them, it definitely wouldn't be them. That's how trusted they become. So this is how manipulative they are. So for children, I think, and obviously when I do my sessions with football clubs, what I want the coaches to do, for instance, is we often talk about, when the game's over, we talk about how well or how bad they played, or should have done this, should have done that, the tactics side of it. I always say, well, why don't we do a little bit of safeguarding with the children afterwards? So just for instance, because I talk a lot about social media. Listen, guys or girls, don't do anything stupid on social media. Now, that took me 2 seconds, 3 seconds. And I think if we instill within coaches and carers and parents, just to drip feed our young children little bits of information about safeguarding, it will empower them to speak, because it'll become the norm. We talk about, and I think Rocco says there is no, and I wish it wasn't called safeguarding, but I didn't create that. But if we make it the norm for children to talk about it, and I say this with parents as well, if a parent goes to an organization, have you got a safeguarding policy? Where is it? Can I access it? Who do I speak to if I've got a problem? Now, if our children see us do that, When they have their children, it'll become the norm and it'll be just something. Now, still, it's like you're challenging an organization if you ask for a safeguarding policy, and if you've got a welfare officer, it's like, well, they sort of they become sort of resistant against it. That's because we've not made it the normal and everyday thing to do. And then we just give them children. We set up little committees so that you can take one individual from each team and they have a meeting and they decide what they want to do in their training sessions, not what the coach does or what they want to do when it's a day out. Give them the opportunity to be able to choose, to select. And then that will give them the confidence then to, if anything's happening, to speak about it. Because I always say, when my children were young, as parents, we're always too busy. When they come to us from school, they ask us, I'm too busy, I'm making tea. I'm too busy, I'm making the beds. I'm too busy, I'm making a cup of tea. Too busy, I'm on the phone. Well, if we continue to do that, when they've got a problem, do we think they're going to come and talk to us? Do we really think they're going to come and talk to us? So we have to make that time when they come and talk to us to listen. And I think we are, and maybe I'm out of turn here, sometimes guilty of saying we're too busy when our children want to speak to us. But as you can understand, then they're not going to speak to us when they've got a problem, Jane.
Agreed. Pragati, I'd like
One
to
second. Just 1 second, Jane.
Ah,
Yeah.
I was going to say, Pragati and Holly, I know you had some
Sorry,
questions,
guys.
comments, so
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
no worries.
No,
I
I
just
think
turned to
you've given us
speak.
so much. You have such a big heart, Paul, and I just want to thank you for being so brave. I think this conversation is how we start. We all have to start to think about, from our own perspectives and our own places of expertise, how and where all these points of opportunity and intervention are, because in a weird way, we have to understand and get into the mindset of these very manipulative people. And you are absolutely right in that it's not, a child is unable to, basically process just what's happening to them every day, to just go to practice and in any social setting want to be liked, want to be accepted, want to succeed. But the parents and these organizations have a unique responsibility, and it does start with all of us being more aware to understand almost how that deviant mentality thinks. And you've given us such food for thought to really process what it is and where and how we do start to change that culture, as you said, Jane, because it isn't okay for us to not have those relationships with our children where we are proactively telling them, your body is your body. Like, we have these amazing programs out there that start to tell kids this at a young age before it becomes an uncomfortable conversation, but to empower children, to educate parents before they just drop their kid off and zoom off to their meeting at a sports practice, to know where are you leaving your child and with whom. And they come home, and as Paul said, a lot of us do that tactical debrief after sports games with our kids. You could have played better defense. You could have, how should you have strategized? But to also ask them, like, were you, okay? And mentally, whether it's emotional abuse, physical abuse, any type of a way where they felt belittled or uncomfortable, to start those conversations. And so thank you for your wisdom and your insight. I hope that we all walk away today with some ideas of strategies, and that you will even consider joining this conversation in whatever way you can, so that we can really move towards solutions. And I am proud to say ISPCAN is certified by your alliance as well. And I do think it's such an amazing legacy. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I know that we've, gone well past time, and I think it was obviously worth everyone's time and energy. And Paul, I think the impact of this webinar will be felt so greatly And I hope that you feel good about that. And again, we know how emotional it is to continue to share your story and to have to go to these dark, deep places, you know.
Listen, I love Jane. I love working with you guys. You know, from when I came to Edinburgh and met everyone, you know, I just, you know, you make me feel part of the family, and you give me a platform to speak, and hopefully that platform helps with the incredible work you're doing globally. You know, so you know, and I guess just in closing from me, you must understand, guys, that yeah, I do get emotional when I think about my family and a lot of things, but this is cathartic for me. You know, I didn't speak for 42 years. Now I'm speaking all the time, and honestly, when we finished and when the session's over, I'll be fine. I'll be fine, and but it gives me, you know, it's been a major important part of my own recovery.
Yeah, we're behind you, Paul, and we're with you. And I hope
Thank
you
you.
feel that love and support from everyone who's on this call. I think we have work to do, but we are in this together. So thank you
Yeah,
for being so brave.
my pleasure. Thanks, Pragati.
And we will continue to engage Paul in our safeguarding working group. So please stay tuned for more information on that. And we hope that all of you would want to join this and take this forward. You know, so Paul's work continues to evolve, and that we can protect our children, not just in sport, but everywhere they live and breathe and play. And that we're not afraid as a parent or a practitioner to say, do you feel safe wherever our kids are?
Thank you, everyone, and very good night from the UK. Thank you, Jane. It's been an absolute pleasure, and Pragati and Holly. Speak to you soon.
Much
Bye,
love.
guys.
Thank you, Paul.
Good everyone. Goodbye or
Bye.
good morning or good night to everyone. Thank you for joining us.